Okay folks, this is Vintage Sewing Machine Garage with next video installment of the restoration of the Singer 15-91, the ugly duckling as I call it, because it was looking dirty and kind of rough. I've used some hand cleaner, non-pumice, real important to not use the kind with pumice in it, and I used it on the finish and it seemed to clean a lot of dirt off. I've still got a ways to go, but it's coming back. I took liquid wrench, which is mostly kerosene based, and I stored this outside in a storage shed. I did not put this in my house because that stuff can really stink up your home. Kerosene is a very foul smelling solvent, but anyway, I took it, and because this machine was stiff, and it was stiffer than most Singers, most vintage Singers straight stitchers are usually very forgiving of not having been run in a while. This one was a little stiffer, so I took the liquid wrench and let it put it in some of the places that you would normally oil. And to remind you guys, liquid wrench or WD-40, any of these sort of products that are designed to loosen stuck metal parts, these are not lubricants, okay? So they are not to be used in place of oil. If you put them in, eventually they evaporate and you have no lubrication. So you have to go back with sewing machine oil, which is what I'm doing. So very important to remember that. It's easy to think, oh, it's oil, but it's not. So I did that and I let it sit overnight, and now you can see she's moving more freely. The machine still has some cleaning to do. Sometimes once you've done what I'm doing, and you get ready to, we're nowhere near getting ready to crank this machine up and plug her in. But once you are, sometimes as long as the machine is not too stiff, because you don't want to overly tax your motor, but you've given the machine time to loosen up with one of these unfreezing, I call them, they're basically products like the WD-40. They're called dispersants, but they basically help to loosen up old oil. And anyway, the other thing I did was on this section, a lot of the old straight stitch Singers introduced the ability to lower the feed dogs. This was for people who would do darning or decorative embroidery. Many people never used that feature. Maybe they weren't really interested in darning socks, I'm not sure. But in any case, it's almost always stuck. In fact, when I was looking at this machine and checking it out, inspecting it, I noticed that my feed dogs were not coming up. And it obviously would not work if they didn't. So I went underneath, and sure enough, the feed dog mechanism at some point had been lowered and tightened for darning and left. And this feature is often, it's often stuck, okay? So because it was so stuck, yeah, I could have taken my screwdriver and forced it, but I thought, you know, let's just let it soak overnight. And sure enough, I did. It was still stiff, but it came undone. And then, of course, since then, I've oiled it and adjusted it, and now my feed dogs are just fine. So, you know, again, the machine has sat for a long time, and that's one of the great things about classic vintage Singers from this era, is that they were built incredibly well, and they're normally I say very forgiving of having sat, not been used. But again, you need to give time and patience. I didn't want to force anything that's really stiff. And as you learn to overhaul sewing machines, you'll realize sometimes a machine, you can get a feel for just how difficult it's going to be to move something that's been sitting for a long time. And if that's the case, you know, I made the decision, well, let me just let it sit overnight and let's give it some time. You can let it sit longer than that. You can let it sit for days if you want. But in any case, I put this in a covered storage shed outdoors so it could vent out there and keep all those fumes out of the house, because that's really not fun. So I am going to continue moving around the machine. You guys saw me do a tension assembly restoration on the Singer 15-125, and I'm going to do it on this one. I think I took photos of it, but I'll try to add in a little commentary about that. And those of you, if you learn to restore sewing machines, you're going to find that vintage Singer tension assemblies like this one are wonderful, because they are not only they're some of the best ever made, ever built, period, they are designed to be taken apart. And they don't mind it at all. In fact, I'm going to be taking this one apart and cleaning it. You can see some of the little, it's not really corrosion. Sometimes you'll see a machine and you'll see something, for example, that looks to your eye like rust. But what this is actually is not rust. It's old oil and dirt and lint. And even if you do have some rust, metal polish will often take that off. But again, what you use on your nickel-plated metal parts, you definitely don't want to put on your finish, because remember, this black lacquer is very sensitive and you want to be careful when you're going to trying to restore its finish. So anyway, you will see here, one of the ways you'll know a direct drive motor, other than the little pot shape in the back, is these are the little access ports for the grease wicks right down here. And this motor design required, it had a lubrication system that involved grease wicks, which works really well. But you know, it probably hasn't been overhauled ever. So, but it was designed to be. That's the beauty of these things. They were designed to, on occasion, be serviced. And I'm going to be doing what I did on the last 15 class machine. That green one, I'm going to be taking the motor assembly off, and I'm going to be taking the grease tanks, accessing those, and replacing all the old goopy grease with new grease. Anyway, I will get you guys caught up when I get ready to do the tension assembly. Thanks.